I thought we were going to talk about this, by the way, just what's going on with IRAs and
Sure. Yeah. Let's do that because you did a fantastic post today. So of course the inauguration was yesterday, and President Trump had I don't know, remember, is it 200 executive orders, and one of the things that he did immediately removed or struck out is this requirement for electric vehicles by 2030 or gas cars. So but what is the impact to people like IRA consumer credits? Can you be more precise about that?
well, first off, I mean, yeah, what I can say is the the lack of like detailed understanding and knowledge is it's like widespread on X. And there are people that call themselves Wall Street analysts, people that call themselves authors in media, that want to get the 160 character tweet out and have some sort of hot take of like, oh, it's going away, it's going to be a problem, or oh, it's not going to be a problem. Or I'm like, well, hold on. Like, why don't we like analyze the situation and understand, what's actually happening? So yeah, I put a long form post out, and I welcome people to like read it and say like, you're wrong. I mean, and so far I haven't seen somebody that has responded that says no, you have no idea what you're talking about. And maybe I could find it and put it up here. But yeah, it goes beyond Tesla, by the way, too. It's also other clean energy stocks, stationary storage. But yeah, there's this whole thing of analysts. Everybody wants to be like quick on the trigger finger. That's why you saw Tesla and other names just immediately sell off at open. I think, I never like to prescribe like what happens within a given day or set of hours with stocks, but I mean, there was a clear trend of clean energy offerings getting, hammered in the beginning. And so let's talk about the ZEV credit system. Well, first off, um, President Trump had his inauguration. Great. That's wonderful. He is not the president of the world. Okay. ZEV credits and clean energy credits are a global thing. It's not a United States thing. So that's point number one. President Trump is not the president of the world. I hope this isn't news to people, but apparently it is, because some people think that ZEV credits only come from the federal government, and they actually don't come from the federal government. And that's the second point. So there, California and a couple other states like Oregon, they led in the development of these clean air credit, this whole clean air carb system. And California set, their own set of mandates on when they want to get to, clean energy vehicles and all their emission standards. They set everything up, and it's a pretty aggressive standard. A lot of the car makers don't like it, but that's California, and they set it up. And 17 states have adopted it. And I would say of those 17 states, probably at least 15 of them are pretty like dark blue in terms of how they vote. And they adopted it. And it's big states. It's California, New York, and so forth. So uh, so the ZEB credit system is um, based off of these state requirements, and 17 states have adopted what California has done. Okay. So I don't know where. So the Clean Air Act, the state ZEB credit system leverages the Clean Air Act. So yeah, could the EPA administrator, could some executive order come in and say, we're going to get rid of this? Well, do we think that the states are going to say, oh, we'll stop all of our clean energy efforts with vehicles, and President Trump put an executive order? No, they're going to sue them. Just like there was an executive order today to end birthright citizenship. There's already 24 lawsuits today. So I don't think clean energy credits are going anywhere. One, I think if it did, it would take take a period of time. This mandate, they're talking about a federal mandate around emission standards, and so there's federal and there's states. And you have to understand where the ZEV credits are coming from, and also Canada has their own credit system. The European Union has their own credit system. That's all progressing. And if anything, both US and Western European car manufacturers are not necessarily ramping up EV supply. So I think there's an opportunity actually in all this with Tesla for this to continue to progress. And I can tell you that the blue states are going to, this will be one of the things that they go to the mat for, in my opinion. But someone could disagree, but that's how that's going. And then, I mean, if there's questions about that, put a hand up. I was going to go to the 7.5K EV credit next. So on the 7.5K EV credit, and just talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. So the Inflation Reduction Act is a law that was passed a couple of years ago. Okay, it's a law. It went through Congress and went through the Senate. It was signed by the president. It's a law. You can't write an executive order that goes perpendicular to and just completely blocks a law like this. You have to go in and pass. Now you could do things that like could curb it per se, but you can't go in and say, we're stopping the 7.5K. We're stopping, the battery manufacturing credit. We're just stopping. Well, okay. Well, then what you need a new law and you need new legislation. And so now the Treasury Secretary, so let's talk about the 7.5K. They have discretion on what vehicles are in that, but the framework for which vehicles are included and which are not are written in the law. So the Treasury Secretary can't necessarily like go like completely wild and say, I'm just going to not follow the law, and he's going to get sued. So I mean, anyway, this is why this thing didn't change overnight. Now, I could be proven wrong, but I mean, I think they would have been locked. They could have, they zeroed out multiple websites. They zeroed out the the C the Customs and Border Patrol, the app for immigrants to file for. They zeroed out a bunch of DE sites. These all happened like overnight. So I think they could have moved more quickly on this if they could have. But anyway, it could be under. I think the 7.5K credit could potentially be impacted. There is a lot of Treasury discretion on that. But the other side of it is the battery manufacturing credit, and that's the $35 per kilowatt hour for cell manufacturing in the U.S. and $10 per kilowatt hour for pack manufacturing. And then there's even other incentives on top of that based on mineral sourcing, and that's a law. And many of those battery factories, this is what changed from like the election night to where we are today. So election night, I think people thought that there was going to be a 7 or 8 or 9 seat majority in the Congress. And it's January 21st, there's a 1 seat majority. So there's a 1 seat majority in Congress, and you're saying you're going to look for a new law that completely guts the IRA. Good luck with that. The second thing is many of the battery factories are built in red states, Nevada, Kansas, you name it. Pennsylvania. Do you think that these states, or they're either red or purple? Like, do you think that these states that have Congress people, remember the 1 seat majority Congress, do you think that this guy that's in the red state, let's say Kansas or whatever, you think he's going to go in and say, I want my battery factory shut down? That we just hired 4,000 people for. Hell no. They're not going to shut down things that they've literally, driven funding for and got their constituents, into the labor force, and it had all these factories open, all these cities, Tennessee, Kentucky. They're all in most of them are in red states, actually. So that's the other side of it so you have and the other thing is the Trump administration is about making tech in the United States. What do? We open up these battery factories to build this technology in the United States so we're not dependent on China. So why would the administration come in and say, "Oh, we're going to get rid of it because it's connected to EVs"? Or they're not going to do that. And they know they need stationary storage for data centers, and they know they need stationary storage for a lot of things. So I don't see that happening. I don't see the battery credit side of this going away. I could be proven wrong, but I just told you about the 1 seat majority in Congress, and I told you that the battery factories are in red states. You're going to go into Congress, you're going to vote against your own constituents. we don't have a Congress that's like ideological like that. I don't think they're going to do that. And then the final thing is on tariffs. By the way, is there any questions on those first two?
No, that's really good. I'm trying to pin your post because it's so
I have it.
well written.
I can do it.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
um,
Pin it.
yeah, and I did. And then the third thing is around tariffs. So I got a lot of feedback I got on tariffs. All right. I will tell you this: Republicans and Democrats are hell bent on the Chinese coming in, setting up shop in Mexico, and then shoveling sub-assemblies or shoving cars over the border. They're not going to let that happen. Trump's not going to let that happen. Republican and Democrat senators and Congress people are not going to let that happen. I guarantee you that that's not going to happen, and I would bet people money on that. So now the question is you have something called the USMCA. You have a trade agreement. By the way, let's just set the groundwork. 1 in 3 Ford, GM, Stellantis cars that you see driving on the roads in the United States, bought in the United States, are made in Mexico or Canada. They are made there. And a significant portion of the content, subassemblies, are made, if the car is final assembled in the US, a lot of subassemblies are coming from Mexico and even Canada. But 1 in 3 vehicles on the road from Ford, GM, Stellantis are made in Mexico. EV, not EV, you name it. That they're coming from Mexico mostly, and some Canada. For the case of Tesla, every Tesla you see on the road in the United States, 100% were built in the United States. So there's a difference. Again, what is this administration looking for? They want the product to be made here. They want automobiles to be made here. So they could repeal the $7,500 credit, and they could replace it with another credit in the form of, a made in the United States, credit. Who knows what's going to happen? That's pure speculation. But in terms of Mexico and Canada, it would not be out of the realm of possibility, and Trump said this yesterday, of him putting a tariff. You can tariff on top of a trade deal. There's going to be lawsuits. There's going to be all kinds of disputes going back and forth. But he can't. The tariff is inside of. There's a lot of people who understand tariffs, and I've dealt with like 100 doing distribution into 150 countries. I can tell you all kinds of stories all day, but tariffs happen inside of the four walls of our country. Our customs and border patrol agents know which items are tariffed, and they have to go collect those funds from the exporter. Now, what people don't understand, or the importer, what people don't understand is, in many of these deals, the costs are not all borne by the importer. The importer says, "Hey, look, the United States just put a 25%, tariff on you. You're not going to be sending me stuff at the same price and expect me to be taking it all at the same rate." So what they do is they tend to cut a deal between the exporter and the importer, and the exporter could be the direct manufacturer of the good, or it could be a distributor overseas. Long story short, it's this whole, everybody's, arms in the air screaming that tariffs or raise taxes. They do not raise taxes unless the money supply actually goes up to buy goods. That's the only way it would actually raise inflation. Sorry, tariffs do not raise inflation unless the money supply goes up in concert with it. Now, and typically what I've seen is that there's deals cut between the importer and exporter to share the burden. In some respects, the consumer can also be a part of experiencing higher prices. But if there's not increased money supply, that doesn't imply inflation, but that's not going to help us. But back to the situation with vehicles, I could see a tariff happening, and I could see it be 100% or 200% on anything China of China origin set up as an assembler or subassembler in Mexico. And this is one of the reasons you saw Tesla put the brakes on the Mexico factory. And the way that Tesla does supplier industrialization is they work with partners all over the world, and they give those supplier partners all over the world the opportunity to be a global sourcer of materials. So, um, So long story short, if Tesla was going to set up that Mexico factory, they were going to rely on a lot of Chinese suppliers to set up shop in Mexico. And with the USMCA, that would have been fine. But I don't think, I think there's going to be enough negative sentiment with the 3 million people in the U.S. auto industry and connected suppliers in the U.S. that they're not going to want a bunch of suppliers from China, setting up in Mexico and dumping product over the border. So I could see tariffs going on Canada and Mexico. Tesla still has some cleanup work. I believe Tesla is getting some parts and some materials and sub-assemblies out of Mexico. I don't quote me, but I don't think it's zero. So I think they would have some work to do, but I think they're in the best position, both from a final assembly and just from a full supply chain perspective, where if Mexico got tariffed or Canada got tariffed, that they would be fine to continue building and they would do better, I think, than anyone else in working through it. And I did get a request to talk about BYD and debt, but anyway.
We'll get there later. But before that, first of all, thank you for that. That was the most nuanced, incredible breakdown of all the different incentives and so forth that's going to be affected. First of all, thank you to Elon. Right? I mean, he foresaw that this could happen earlier in the year. Remember last year, everybody said in January, "Oh my God, they're about to launch the Giga Mexico." And then why didn't they do that? Tesla must be in trouble. He pulled back for a couple of reasons. One is the economy, and two, this potential for this to occur. He planned it correctly. For Trump to come in and his policies. Now, the two executive orders that were assigned yesterday that is affecting auto industry, I think they're nothing burgers, and you can tell me if you think I'm right. First is eliminate the electrical vehicle mandate. The second one was end state emissions waivers. Eliminating the electric vehicle mandate, right, which is setting a certain target of how many EVs an automaker has to make. I don't care if that goes away by 2030. That's not, it's basically the market has chosen electric vehicles at this point. You can go ahead and make gas cars all you want. You're going to lose at this point because, electric vehicles are just so much better.
But the states, Herbert, too. The states, that's the other thing is, and Elmar knows this, and he can comment, he can jump in. There was jockeying going back and forth between the state requirements and the federal requirements. If the federal requirements, like if you just took it away, you still have the state requirements there.
Yeah, exactly. And the state emissions waiver, just ending that, it's not a big deal because there is federal emission waiver already there anyways. And so, anyways, I think both of these, nothing's going to impact, neither's going to impact Tesla necessarily. I don't think.
Well, I mean, there's a greater than 0% probability it could. That's why I kind of like laid it out in the post. I don't think it's 0%, but I think if you think through these things in a logical manner versus just saying, IRA, go away, Trump, like if you really start doing critical thinking and like the battery manufacturing, where the factory's at, and you start stepping through it, and then you start assigning probabilities to these things happening, more and more of these things have a probability that are under 100%. And the more of these factors that have a probability of under 100%, when you actually, look at it in totality, the probability of it all occurring would be low. But, again, I think there's some risk to the 7.5K credit in summary. I think there's less risk to the battery manufacturing credit. But even if something came out tomorrow that somehow blew it up, somehow the law changed, I think the way the Trump administration, this is an opinion now, I think the way the Trump administration thinks is they would replace it with, we want you to build stuff in the United States. You build in the United States, you're going to get credit. Even Trump talked about this when he was campaigning of like, well, if I get rid of these credits, but I give you a credit for building, in the US.
Yeah. And Tesla will be well positioned. Okay. Thank you for that, Jeff. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.